There are places in the world where the air itself remembers, where the wind carries not only the scent of rain and heather, but the tremor of old sorrow, old longing, echoes that never found rest. If you wander far enough into the Irish moors at twilight, when the mist rolls low and the last light bleeds into gray, you might hear it. A cry, soft as silk, distant as memory. It slips through the hollows between stones, between the heartbeats of the living, between the breaths of those who still remember love. Some call it the wind, others the song of the dead, but the old ones, they call it her, the Banshee. No one agrees on what she once was, woman, goddess, ghost, or grief given form. Yet all agree on what she has become, the messenger between life and death, the voice that sings before loss. Her wail is no ordinary sound. It is the lament of centuries, woven from the tears of mothers, lovers, and daughters who watched light fade from the eyes of those they cherished. To hear her cry is to feel something ancient awaken inside you, a tenderness so deep it hurts, a sorrow that feels strangely familiar, as if you have loved and lost in lifetimes you cannot recall. In the villages that dot the Emerald Hills, they tell stories of her visits. They say she appears when death draws near, her presence a whisper before the storm, a kiss before the silence. She stands by the window or near the river's bend, her long hair gleaming pale as bone under the moonlight, her lips parted in a soundless promise. Those who glimpse her describe not terror, but beauty, the kind that breaks the heart. Her eyes, they say, hold the shimmer of tears that never fall. Her touch, if ever it reaches you, is cold, but strangely gentle, as if even death itself has learned to be merciful. Yet there are deeper tales, older than any churchyard stone, that tell a softer truth, that before she became the herald of loss, she was love itself, a spirit bound to the pulse of human emotion. They say she once walked among mortals, her laughter bright as it chime in the wind, her heart open to the warmth of the world. But love, the most radiant and ruinous of gifts, bound her to a fate no soul should bear. Some say she loved a mortal man whose life was claimed too soon, and in her grief she refused to let go. Others claim she defied the gods, trading her own heartbeat to guard his spirit beyond the veil. Whatever the tale, her curse was born of devotion, a punishment not of malice, but of feeling too deeply.
Now her song lingers across generations, a mourning that never ends. There is an evening each year when the moors fall utterly still. The wind dies, the birds vanish from the air, and even the sheep grow restless in their pens. On that night, the mist thickens until it becomes a shroud, and through it a melody rises, fragile, trembling, unbearably tender. It begins as a hum, like breath drawn through sorrow, then unfolds into notes that carry the weight of unspoken words. Those who have lost someone they love say the sound draws tears without knowing why. Those who have never loved claim it fills them with longing for something they cannot name. It is said that the Banshee's voice does not merely foretell death, it awakens the ache that makes life precious. Her lament is a mirror. It shows you the faces you've forgotten, the warmth you once held, the moments you let drift away. In her cry, one hears the universal story. To love is to lose, and to lose is to remember. Long ago, in a time before language was bound by ink and scripture, she was worshipped as the Morning Maiden, a sacred figure who guided souls through the threshold between flesh and spirit. Her temple was the open sky, her altar the flowing river. The people believed that when she wept, her tears blessed the earth, and from their salt grew flowers that bloomed only in the wake of death, pale blossoms known as tears of the moon. These flowers, they said, marked the path for souls to find their way home. But as centuries passed, reverence turned to fear. The world forgot how to honor sorrow and began to hide it instead. Her name, once spoken in prayer, became a whisper of dread. They told children to close their windows at night, to pray if they heard her song. Yet even in fear, fascination endured. Lovers would sneak to the cliffs to listen for her, believing that those who truly understood her cry would be spared from a meaningless life. For to hear her was to be reminded of what it meant to feel. There is a legend of a traveler who once wandered the misty roads of Connacht. He was a poet, they say, weary from love and haunted by dreams of a woman he could not name. One night, as the fog thickened around him, he heard a voice, faint, lilting, full of ache. Drawn to it, he followed the sound until he saw her, standing beside an ancient yew tree, her gown whispering against the grass, her eyes alight with moonlight and sorrow. She did not speak, but her presence filled the air with an impossible tenderness. The poet fell to his knees, weeping, for in her face he saw every woman he had ever loved and lost. When dawn came, she was gone, and in his hand he found a single white flower, glistening with dew that tasted of salt. He never wrote another poem after that, for he said every word was already contained in her cry.
So the myth endures, not as a warning, but as a memory of how closely love and loss entwine. The Banshee's song is not merely a sound of mourning. It is an embrace that transcends time. Those who listen carefully might hear beneath the wail a melody of yearning, a soul still searching for the warmth she once knew. Some say she appears not to bring death, but to stand beside it, to cradle the departing heart as it slips into the beyond. In that final moment, when breath falters and silence begins to bloom, perhaps it is her touch that eases the fear. The moors remain unchanged, ageless as her sorrow. The heather bends beneath invisible steps, and the rivers hum her melody to the stones below. The air, heavy with rain and memory, carries her essence through every dusk. She is there in the sigh of the wind through the hollow hills, in the rustle of willow branches over graves, in the softest note of a distant lullaby. The banshee is the sound of love refusing to die.
And though mortals tremble at her song, some part of them always listens, because deep within they know her voice. It is the sound that once left their own lips in moments of heartbreak. It is the whisper that escapes in dreams of those long gone. It is the breath caught between stay and goodbye. The myth says she cannot enter a home uninvited, yet she is always near. When you sit by the window and feel the night pressing close, when an unnameable sadness stirs without reason, it may be that she is passing by, not to harm, but to remember with you. Her cry is both mourning and mercy. She sings for those who cannot weep, for those whose hearts have forgotten how to ache. So the legend lives, fragile and eternal. In every place where mist meets moonlight, her presence lingers, unseen, unfelt, but always known. She belongs to the spaces between heartbeat and silence, between love and loss, between the last breath of one life and the first sigh of the next. To hear her is to be reminded that even sorrow has its beauty, and even death has its tenderness. And perhaps that is her true gift, not fear, but remembrance, a soft reminder that every life, no matter how brief, leaves behind a sound, and that love, once awakened, never truly fades. It only changes its voice until one night, in the hush of the moors, you hear it calling your name.
There are many who speak of the Banshee as if she were a shadow without substance, a mere whisper of misfortune that drifts through the night. Yet those who have felt her nearness know that she is more than a spirit of warning. She is the echo of what it means to love too deeply, to ache so fiercely that even death cannot quiet the heart. They call her by many names, for she has worn countless faces through the ages. To some, she is Aoife, to others, Eileen, and in the tongue of the old poets, she is Bian a Sea, the woman of the mounds, where the veil between the worlds is thin as breath. But names cannot hold her, for she is not bound by form or time. She is feeling made flesh, the pulse of grief, the shimmer of devotion that never fades. When she walks, the air bends around her like silk in water. Her feet do not touch the ground, yet the grass trembles beneath her. Her hair falls in waves as pale as moonlight through mist, sometimes silver, sometimes white as frost. Her face is not the face of death, but of memory, delicate, unearthly, luminous with quiet sorrow. To look upon her is to feel something stir in the chest, a sudden ache that feels like recognition. There is a beauty in her, but not the kind born of warmth or flesh. It is the beauty of twilight, fleeting, tender, aching with impermanence. Her eyes are her truest language, vast and gray as rain-soaked skies, filled with the shimmer of tears that have never been shed. In their depths lives a reflection of every soul she has ever sung for. When she sings, the sound is more breath than voice. It begins as a tremor drawn from the farthest corner of her being and rises in notes that quiver like candlelight.
Her song carries no words, only feeling, longing, tenderness, regret. Each note unfurls like a sigh, so intimate it feels as though she leans close enough for you to feel her breath near your ear. And yet, beneath her stillness lies hunger, not for life as mortals know it, but for touch, for the warmth of presence, for the heartbeat she can no longer claim. Some say she weeps not for the dead, but for herself, forever condemned to sing for love she can no longer feel. For centuries she wandered alone through the moors, her voice the only sound that broke the silence. The living feared her, prayed against her, hid when her cry drifted through the night. None dared look upon her until he came, the man whose fate would entwine with hers.
His name was Callum O'Dare, though in the stories that survived, he is remembered only as the listener. He was not a man of wealth or renown, merely a soul adrift in grief. The loss of his beloved had hollowed him, left him moving through the days as if they were rooms with no doors. His cottage stood on the edge of the moor, where the earth faded into fog. Each night he sat by the fire that no longer warmed him, listening to the wind's soft moan. It was on such a night that he first heard her. At first, he thought it was his own heart speaking, the kind of sound that rises from inside one's ribs when memory grows too heavy. But the voice came again, fragile as glass, laced with pain so exquisite it felt like beauty. He stepped outside, following the melody as if it were a thread leading him through the mist. He found her by the river, standing where the water lapped against stone. The moon had wrapped her in its cold glow. She turned toward him slowly, as if surprised to be seen. Their eyes met, and in that instant something ancient passed between them. Callum felt no fear, only recognition. It was not that he had seen her before, but that he had known her always, somewhere beyond memory. Her face stirred 1,000 forgotten feelings, the ache of first love, the agony of farewell, the tenderness of holding someone already slipping away. He could not speak. He only looked, and she looked back, her lips trembling with the echo of the song that had led him there. For her part, the Banshee felt something she had not felt in lifetimes, a pulse within her stillness. She had sung for countless souls, watched them pass beyond the veil, but never had one turned toward her with eyes not of fear, but of understanding. His gaze pierced through her sorrow, as if to remind her she had once been whole. The wind curled around them, carrying fragments of her melody through the reeds. He stepped closer, slowly, his breath visible in the cold air. "Who are you?" he whispered, though some part of him already knew. Her reply was not in words, but in the faint curve of her lips, a smile that carried centuries of loneliness. Her voice, when it came, was softer than falling rain. "A name cannot hold what I am." He wanted to reach out, to touch her, to prove she was real, but something in her stillness held him back, a reverence he could not explain. She moved like mist, close enough to feel, but never to grasp. Yet in her presence he felt alive again.
Night after night, he returned to the river's edge. Each time she was there, waiting, as if she too had been bound by the invisible thread between them. They spoke little. Words seemed too clumsy for what lingered in the air. Instead, they shared silences, looks, and the quiet exchange of sorrow. Her song became his solace, her sadness the mirror of his own. Sometimes she would tell him of the world beyond, of how souls shimmered like stars when they crossed into peace, of how love could still be felt even when the body was gone. She spoke not as death's herald, but as its keeper, soft and kind. And he listened, because in her voice he heard the sound of his lost beloved, not her words, but her essence, her warmth woven into the rhythm of the Banshee's sighs. Yet beneath their communion, an unspoken truth rippled. Her presence meant the shadow of death was near. He knew this, and so did she, but neither could turn away. The more he sought her, the closer he drew to his own end. Sometimes, when the wind rose, she would retreat to the edge of the mist, her eyes filled with pleading. "Do not follow me," she whispered, though her tone carried no command, only pain. He could not obey. His life had already been hollowed out with grief. What remained belonged to her song. One night, she came to him before he called. The mist wrapped the cottage in silver light. He looked upon her not with fear, but the quiet joy of a man who finally sees what he has been waiting for. He touched his face then, her fingers cool as water, trembling as if afraid of her own daring. His breath caught. Her touch was both comfort and curse. In that brief contact, he felt every sorrow she had ever carried, every tear she had never shed. "Why me?" he whispered. Her eyes shimmered, endless and tender. "Because you heard me, and because I remember what it means to be heard." Their fates, once separate, were now intertwined, a mortal and a spirit bound by longing deeper than life itself. Between them hung an impossible tenderness, the kind born of knowing that every moment together was a step closer to farewell. And still they met. He no longer feared the sound of her cry in the night. Instead, he waited for it. The melody that had once meant death now became the sound of connection, of something vast and aching that neither could escape. For the Banshee, this fragile bond stirred a forbidden hope, that perhaps love could still touch what the gods had damned to solitude. But hope, in her world, is the most dangerous curse of all. The days that followed blurred into a soft haze of waiting. For Callum, the hours between dusk and her arrival became both torment and purpose. He no longer slept, for sleep was hollow. His hands still tended nets and stoked fires, but his thoughts remained by the river, listening for that faint hum that promised she was near. Each night the wind changed before she came, carrying a scent like rain on stone, something once alive. When she appeared, the air grew fragile, as though the world held its breath. She would stand among the reeds, woven from mist and moonlight, her gaze searching his face as if to memorize it before she faded again. Each meeting deepened the ache neither dared to name. Grief had not dulled for Callum, it had only changed shape, becoming tender and dangerous. Her presence filled the hollow in him, yet widened it too, for every moment with her carried the weight of its own ending. At first they spoke of simple things, the tides, the wind, the quiet stars, but soon silence became their truest language. He watched her lips part as though to speak, then close again, her eyes turning to the horizon. In those unspoken pauses, desire began to bloom, quiet, inevitable. One night, the mist was thicker than ever, curling around them like breath. The moon trembled on the water. Callum stepped closer than he had before. The distance between them quivered. He felt the chill that surrounded her, but beneath it, faint as a pulse beneath ice, there was warmth. "Do you feel it too?" he whispered. She lifted her hand, trembling. Her fingers hovered inches from his chest where his heart beat strong. For a moment, the air between them crackled, two realms brushing. Then she pulled away. "Every time you come, you step closer to the edge," she said softly. "Then let me fall." Her eyes flickered, half fear, half longing. "You do not know what you ask." "But I know what I feel," he said. "Death already came for me once. You only remind me I can still feel alive." Her form flickered in the moonlight, edges thinning like fog. "Feeling is what binds you to life. It is what I lost. You would not trade your breath for my silence." He met her gaze. "Then let me breathe your silence." She turned from him, hair lifting with the wind. The river swelled, restless, echoing her turmoil. The song that left her lips was not mourning, but yearning. It ached with hunger, the hunger of one who remembers touch only in dreams. It wrapped around him, warm and cold at once. The world faded. There was only her voice and his heartbeat. When it ended, she faced him again, eyes gleaming like wet stone. "You are not meant to love me." He smiled faintly. Perhaps love was never meant to be kind. Silence thickened, heavy, magnetic. The night itself seemed to pulse. She looked at him, and for the first time let the pull take her. He reached for her slowly, reverently. Though her nature forbade it, she did not move. His fingers brushed her arm, the faintest contact, like touching a ghost. Her skin was cool as river water, yet it set his pulse on fire. For a moment she closed her eyes, and life returned to her in a single stolen breath. The mist deepened. Her voice trembled. "If I touch you truly, it will mark you. Then let it." Her breath shuddered in the cold air. To touch him was to cross a boundary, and bridges always lead somewhere. If she reached fully, something of him would follow her into the dark. Still, she wanted. Her hand rose again and found his cheek. The world unraveled. His warmth bled into her. Her cold sank into him. His heartbeat slowed, not in fear, but surrender. He leaned into her palm, breathing her sorrow, her scent of rain and ash. For one timeless instant, something passed between them. Not life, not death, but the shimmer where both meet. She felt warmth bloom inside her, like sunlight through fog. He felt her sorrow fill him, vast and endless.
She pulled away with a cry, part pleasure, part pain. The wind surged, scattering the mist. Callum stumbled, vision flickering. She wavered, her edges fraying like smoke. "Do you see?" she whispered. "I cannot hold what I love. I only take it." He reached for her, desperate, but his fingers met air. "You must not seek me again," she said. "If you do, the song will not call, it will claim." Then she was gone. He sank to his knees by the river. The night felt colder, emptier, but her touch still burned on his skin, like frost refusing to melt. Days passed. He tried to forget, but the memory of her voice haunted him. Sometimes in the fog he saw her, a flicker of white, a shadow turning away. The world without her felt dim, drained of meaning. So he returned. The river waited, quiet beneath a waning moon. He called her name. No answer came, only the wind, low and sighing. Then, faintly, her song drifted from the mist. It was no longer warning, but lament, sweet and unbearable. "Why do you call me back?" she asked, appearing at the water's edge, sorrow radiant in her face. "Because I am already yours." Her gaze trembled. "To love me is to vanish." "Then let me vanish," he whispered, "so long as I vanish near you." The mist coiled tighter, the air pulsing between them. She looked at him, this fragile, stubborn mortal who had turned her curse into longing, and for the first time she faltered. Her lips parted, and the world leaned closer. The distance closed. It was not a kiss, nor a touch, but the merging of breath and sorrow, the space where love becomes its own undoing. The river stilled. The night forgot to move. The sound that left her lips was not a wail, but a moan, trembling with the warmth she borrowed from him. In that moment, love became both creation and ruin. And though dawn would come soon, its light would never find them unchanged.
The night was a breath held between worlds. The river gleamed like a silver scar beneath the moon, and the mist wound around Callum and the Banshee until there was no horizon, no earth, only the trembling space between her sorrow and his longing. She stood before him, fragile as the outline of a memory. Her eyes shimmered, twin pools of sorrow and desire, holding the reflection of a man who had already crossed too far into her realm. "I warned you," she whispered, voice shaking like glass. "You should not have come back." "I had no choice," he said softly. "You left your voice inside me." The wind brushed between them, carrying the faint scent of rain and heather. It clung to her hair, tangled it like strands of night. He reached for her once more, knowing the risk, knowing he might not return from whatever waited on the other side of her touch. Her hand trembled, suspended between duty and yearning. "If I take you," she murmured, "I take everything. Breath, warmth, the sound of your heart. Then take it, he said. I have no life left that is not already yours. For a moment, the air thickened with silence, as if even time paused to listen. Then she moved closer, her body not quite solid, her outline rippling with the river's sigh. She lifted her hand to his face, her fingertips trailing along his jaw with a tenderness so delicate it was almost pain. Her touch was cool, but beneath it pulsed the faint memory of heat, as though she borrowed it from him with each caress. He closed his eyes. The world fell away. Her lips met his, cold, searching, impossibly soft. The contact was neither human nor ghostly, but something deeper, more sacred. It was like the meeting of two tides, the collision of grief and longing, surrender and hunger. The mist swirled around them, whispering in forgotten tongues, and the stars above flickered as if they too were watching. The kiss deepened, though she had no breath to give, and he gave all of his. Each heartbeat slowed, echoed, then dissolved into hers. The river beneath them murmured louder, carrying the rhythm of two souls colliding. His hands found her shoulders, and though she felt weightless, his touch anchored her, tethered her to the world she had been forbidden to feel. A shudder passed through her, part sorrow, part pleasure. She could feel his warmth seeping into her, chasing away centuries of cold. For the first time since her death, she felt alive. Her body, once a vessel of lament, now trembled with sensation, every nerve singing. Yet beneath it, a dread stirred, for every breath she borrowed would cost him one of his own. He did not care. He only held her closer. "Don't stop," he whispered against her mouth. Her voice was barely sound. "You don't know what this means." "I do," he said, his breath warm against her fading skin. "And I choose it."
A tremor went through her, and she pressed her forehead to his. The air between them throbbed with light, faint, pale, like the last pulse of a dying star. His heartbeat grew faint, but steady, sinking with the rhythm of her sorrow. The mist wrapped tighter, cocooning them in silver. It was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Her fingers slid down his neck, his chest, feeling the slow, fading drum of life beneath her touch. Her lips traced his skin, tasting salt and warmth, each kiss stealing a little more of what she could never keep. He gasped softly, not in pain, but wonder. The cold spread through him, but it felt like peace. His vision dimmed, yet her face grew sharper, radiant, more beautiful than before. Her eyes glowed faintly now, luminous with borrowed life, and tears of light ran down her cheeks. "I can feel it," she whispered, voice breaking. "Your heart is giving itself to me." "Then let it," he breathed. "Let it be my gift." The world around them dimmed until only the river's voice remained, a low, endless murmur. The air hummed with energy, the boundary between realms dissolving. She pulled him closer, desperate now, her need overtaking fear. The kiss that followed was endless, both promise and goodbye.
He felt his body grow lighter, as though his weight, his pain, his mortality were slipping away. Yet his love for her only deepened. Her fingers traced the curve of his throat, then his lips, reverent, trembling. Her tears touched his skin, not cold this time, but warm, almost human. "You're becoming part of me. You're fading." He smiled weakly. "Then at least I'll never have to leave." She cried out softly, not in despair, but in rapture. Her body began to glow, her edges softening, her voice melting into song. It rose and fell like the tide, filled with beauty and unbearable sadness. Each note shimmered through the night, carrying both her joy and her guilt. The sound filled the moor, the air, the hollow places inside the world. The stones themselves seemed to tremble in sympathy. Her song became the night's breath, a lament woven from love's final heartbeat. And still she held him. His eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment he saw her not as spirit or omen, but as a woman, fragile, luminous, aching with the same hunger he felt. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch faint now, barely real.
"You're beautiful," he whispered. Her lips trembled. "You shouldn't say that." "Then let me be wrong." She kissed him again, and with that kiss his body dissolved into mist. A single sigh escaped him, a sound that was neither pain nor fear, but release. His warmth entered her, flooding her veins with the echo of his life. Her voice broke, the song collapsing into silence. She stood alone, the river murmuring at her feet. The mist shimmered around her like the remnants of a dream. For a long moment, she did not move. Then she lifted her hands and looked down, and there, faint but real, warmth pulsed beneath her translucent skin. She could feel his heartbeat within her. It was weak, flickering, but alive. Tears filled her eyes. She had touched life again, but only by stealing it. The wind wept through the reeds, as if mourning with her. She sank to her knees, cradling the emptiness where he had been. The dawn crept slowly across the moor, painting the mist in pale gold. Her glow dimmed beneath it, and her body began to fade. Yet she could still hear him, faint within her, a whisper beneath her breath, a rhythm beneath her silence. "I am still here," he seemed to say. She closed her eyes. The warmth flickered once, twice, then steadied. For the first time in centuries, she felt something more than sorrow. The sun touched the river, and steam rose in thin veils. Her form shimmered, half light, half shadow. The curse that had bound her trembled, loosened, but did not break. She would remain what she was, a herald of endings. Yet now something new had taken root inside her, something that would never leave. She turned her face to the rising light. Her lips parted, and from them came a single note, soft, trembling, radiant with love.
It was not the cry of death that had once haunted the living, but a song of remembrance. It drifted over the moor, over the graves, over the waters that had witnessed everything, a melody of sorrow and beauty intertwined, her final confession to the world. And as her body dissolved into mist once more, the sound lingered, faint, eternal, echoing through the dawn. Some said that from that day the Banshee's wail changed. It was no longer a scream of warning, but a sigh of love, the echo of a kiss shared between a soul that dared to love death, and a spirit who learned for a fragile moment to love life again. And in that sigh, the wind carried both their names. For she could not join him, nor could he return to life. Their union had blurred the boundary, leaving them both caught in the middle. She carrying his warmth like a borrowed flame, he a whisper entwined with her voice. Sometimes, when the night grew still and the veil between worlds thinned, she thought she heard him. "I am here." His words were faint, carried in the breath of the wind, in the hush of water against stone. And she would answer, her voice trembling, "I know." The centuries passed unnoticed by her, for time held little meaning in that twilight realm. Yet something within her had changed forever. She no longer wailed to foretell death. Her cry had softened into a song of passage, guiding souls from one side to the other. Mortals began to speak of her differently, not as a harbinger of doom, but as a gentle presence who eased the dying toward rest. The people no longer feared her. They left offerings by the water, white flowers, candles, scraps of cloth, tokens of reverence, not fear. They called her Annam Chown, the gentle soul. And though they never saw her, they swore that when death came quietly, they heard a voice like starlight in the dark, the Banshee's song, carrying love through sorrow. Yet the truth lied deeper than they knew. She still visited the river where they had met. The earth remembered his footsteps. The air held the shape of his name. There she would kneel and let her fingers trace the water's surface, feeling it cool and alive beneath her touch. Sometimes she thought she saw him reflected there, faint, smiling, as if the current itself carried his soul. In those moments she would whisper, "Stay with me," and the river would murmur in reply, "Always." Her heart, that borrowed, fragile thing, would tremble. It no longer beat as a mortal's heart, but it pulsed in rhythm with the river, slow and steady. It was the heartbeat of memory. One winter night, as frost crept across the moor, she felt the pull of a dying soul, an old woman in a nearby village, her breath fading with the cold. The Banshee went, unseen as she always did. She sang softly by the woman's window, her song gentle, almost tender. But as she sang, the old woman stirred and opened her eyes. For a moment they met, mortal and spirit, and the woman smiled. "You're not what I was told," she whispered. The Banshee's voice wavered. "What were you told?" "That you were death."
The morning after their union was quiet, unnaturally so. The moor lay beneath a veil of pearl-colored mist, and the river,
once wild with whispers, now moved with solemn calm. No birds called, no wind stirred the reeds. The world seemed to hold its breath, as though mourning something it could not name. The villagers spoke of it first at dawn, the fishermen who did not return, the pale woman seen standing at the riverbank before the sun rose. Some said they heard a song in the mist, a sound too beautiful to belong to grief, too sorrowful to belong to joy. They found no body, only Callum's coat laid neatly on the grass beside the water, and the faint impression of bare feet in the mud that led nowhere. The reeds had been bent as if someone had knelt there for a long time. And though the villagers whispered of curses, none dared to linger by the river again. They said the air felt heavier now, thick with something that watched, that waited. Some nights, when fog rolled in from the sea, the sound of weeping rose and fell across the moor. But it was not the banshee's cry they had known before. It was softer, gentler, threaded with longing. The old ones said the banshee's voice had changed because she had loved. Yet love in her world had never meant salvation. Far from the eyes of mortals, beyond the veil of mist, she wandered the edge of two worlds. Her form shimmered, neither shadow nor light, neither alive nor dead. The warmth she had taken from him pulsed faintly in her chest, a fragile echo of a human heartbeat. At times she felt it as comfort, at others as a wound. When she closed her eyes, she could still see him, his hands, the curve of his smile, the way he had said her name as though it were sacred. That name had become a prayer within her, and though she no longer had tears, she carried sorrow like breath. She walked the places they had met, the river, the cliffs, the stone where the wind had first brought her voice to him. The world seemed emptier now, though the living passed through it unaware. Her curse remained, to appear when death drew near, to sing the final lament. But now her song carried his memory. Each time she sang, she felt him stir within her, faint, distant, but present. His essence lingered, woven into her being like thread through mist. He was not gone, not entirely. Love had bound them in a way no death could sever. Still, it was a cruel mercy.
The banshee's lips parted in a small, aching smile. Perhaps, but only to those who fear it. The woman nodded faintly. And to you? The question struck her like a bell through mist. She hesitated, then looked beyond the window, toward the distant river glowing under the moon. To me, she said softly, death is the only place where love still waits. The woman smiled again and drifted into peace. The banshee lingered for a long time, her voice fading into silence. When she turned to leave, the snow had begun to fall, each flake catching the moonlight like tiny ghosts. She walked through them, her body half light, half shadow, her hair trailing behind her like threads of silver smoke. That night, she returned to the river. The mist rose to greet her, and she stood where Callum had once stood, the memory of his warmth flickering in her chest. The water rippled, faintly glowing. "Are you still here?" she whispered. The air stirred, the river sighed,
and within that sound came his voice, faint but sure. Always. She smiled, her sorrow softening into serenity. Then slowly, she stepped into the water. It did not chill her. It welcomed her. The river rose around her, glowing with soft light, and for the first time in centuries, she felt something like peace. Her body began to dissolve, the mist embracing her as one of its own. Her song rose, quiet, luminous, filled with love. It spread across the moor, echoing through stone and sky. Those who heard it that night woke in tears, though they could not say why. They only knew it was beautiful, the kind of beauty that hurts, the kind that lingers. When the sun rose, the river shone pale gold, and the mist that clung to its surface shimmered with warmth. The villagers who passed by swore they felt a presence, gentle, watching, and that the morning air seemed softer somehow. They said the Banshee was gone, but sometimes, in the hush before dawn, they still heard her voice, not weeping now, but humming as if love itself had taken root in the wind. And those who listened closely swore they heard another voice beside hers, a man's, quiet and sure, bound to her song forever. Together, their melody drifted through the moors, across time and silence, the sound of love that neither death nor sorrow could unmake. And when the wind passed over the river, it carried a promise whispered between worlds, I am here, always.
The Moors remember, even when centuries slip quietly into dust and names fade from the stones, the air holds the echo of her song. It drifts through the heather and along the river's curve, threading through the spaces between heartbeats, soft, eternal, unforgotten. They say the Banshee's cry no longer speaks of doom, but of remembrance. Where once her voice was terror, now it is tenderness, the trembling edge between love and loss. Some claim that when her lament rises across the mist, it is not for the dead at all, but for the living who have forgotten how to feel. And perhaps they are right. For love in its truest form is not gentle. It wounds as it heals, devours as it gives. It is both the spark and the ash, the sigh that creates and the silence that follows. The Banshee knew this, and in her knowing she became something greater than the curse that bound her. She became the voice of the world's longing, the sound of every heart that ever loved too deeply to let go. Her tale lingers because it is not only hers. It belongs to all who have stood at the edge of parting and wished to hold on a moment longer. To all who have whispered a name into the wind, hoping the wind might whisper it back. The myth of the Banshee endures not as a warning, but as a mirror. We see ourselves in her, our hunger for connection, our fear of its cost. We long for what cannot stay, and when it leaves, we chase its echo through dreams
dreams and memories. Perhaps that is what it means to be human, to ache beautifully. In the beginning, she was only a shadow of grief, a herald of endings. Yet, through love, she discovered the smallest defiance, that even in death, feeling could survive. Her voice changed because she changed. The Banshee's wail became a hymn of remembrance, and her sorrow became a language of devotion. What began as a curse transformed into a communion between worlds. Every sound of wind that brushes through the heather carries part of her. Every ripple in the river hums with the pulse she borrowed from the man who loved her. Their story continues, not in flesh or form, but in resonance. Two souls woven into the fabric of the earth, breathing through mist and melody.
When travelers cross the moors at dusk, they often stop without knowing why. Something in the air stills them, a faint hum like a lullaby too soft to name. Some feel warmth in their chest, a tug of memory they cannot place. Others weep without reason, as though the song has reached a part of them long forgotten. No one remembers her name, nor his. Time has worn away the syllables, but not the feeling. The myth has outgrown the story. It has become the heartbeat of silence, the ache behind beauty, the soft reminder that every ending hides a trace of love. And what is the Banshee's cry now, if not love refusing to die? It rises at twilight, when the world seems to blur between light and shadow. It trembles in the space between breath and silence, life and afterlife. It says what words cannot, that even in loss there is music. Even in sorrow there is grace. Perhaps that is why the legend still calls to us. It does not promise comfort, only recognition. It says, you too will love and lose and long, and in that longing you will touch the divine. The Banshee's caress was never meant to soothe, it was meant to awaken. Her song reminds us that beauty is not eternal, but it leaves an eternal mark. Every moment of love, every shared breath, every trembling touch, all of it becomes part of the great lament that hums beneath the world. When she stepped into the river and dissolved into mist, she did not vanish. She became what she always was meant to be, the embodiment of remembrance. The song that endures when the singer fades, the sigh that lingers after the kiss. Some say her voice is the soul of Ireland itself, wild, mournful, tender. Others believe she is the echo of all who have ever loved beyond reason. Maybe she is both. Maybe she is the bridge between what we were and what we still hope to become. Because every myth is a reflection of a truth too vast to name. The Banshee's caress speaks of the beauty that ruins us and the ruin that beautifies us. It whispers that no love is wasted, not even one that ends in tears. The ache it leaves behind becomes the proof that something sacred once lived within us. And so her legend continues, passed in murmurs and sighs,
through firelight and song. The people tell it differently each time. Sometimes she is the maiden of the river, sometimes the weeping wife of a lost soldier, sometimes a nameless spirit who walks the moors under a waning moon. But the heart of it never changes. It is always about the same thing, the touch of love that costs everything, yet is worth the loss. Children still ask their elders, "Why does the banshee cry?" And the elders, with eyes turned distant, answer softly, "Because she remembers." Perhaps that is all any of us ever do, remember. The way someone once looked at us, the warmth of a hand, the silence that followed a final goodbye. The banshee simply sings what we cannot say. When you hear the wind keening across lonely fields, listen closely. Beneath the sorrow there is tenderness. Beneath the lament, a confession. You might hear her voice whispering to the one she still loves across time, "I am here." And you might feel for a heartbeat that someone whispers back, "Always." And maybe that is why her story endures, not because it frightens, but because it recognizes us, because it dares to speak the secret every soul carries, that to love is to die a little, and to die is to remember love. So when you walk alone at twilight and the air grows still, do not fear the sound that rises through the mist. It is not a warning, it is a promise. It is the echo of a love that refused to end, the gentle haunting of beauty's afterglow. The banshee's caress lives in every touch that lingers too long, every goodbye that trembles on the lips. It is the ache of memory and the grace of surrender, a song that began in sorrow but became a hymn to the persistence of feeling. And perhaps somewhere deep within us, we all carry a fragment of her, the part that wails when we lose, that sings when we remember, that keeps loving even after the light has gone. For what is a myth if not a mirror held to the soul? And what is the soul if not a song that refuses silence? So let the wind carry her voice, let it move through the heart like a slow, aching tide. Let it remind us that every cry in the wind, every whisper across the dark might be a soul remembering love. The moor will fade, the river will shift, but her song, their song, will remain. And when it reaches you, may you close your eyes and understand it was never just a lament. It was a love story, whispered between worlds, still searching for a place to rest.